Welcome to Trading Trends. This is Ilya Spivak, head of Global Macro here at tastylive, joined once again by our returning champion. Adrian Day is here. He's the CEO of Adrian Day Asset Management. Adrian, welcome back.
Well, thank you very much for asking me, Ilya. Good to be back.
I want to get right into the topic du jour. I'm sure it's front of mind for you. Gold has been obviously falling since the start of this Iran war, and it's been a kind of logical progression. Oil spikes and markets go, this is an inflation risk. They drive up interest rates, they drive up the dollar, gold comes down. It's been an interesting sort of thing watching this most recent spike in oil where gold will not sell off. What do you think is going on here?
Partly is because, this has been a seesaw, hasn't it, from the day the bombing started, both in reality and also, with the various posts from the president and so on and so forth. So we've been going backwards and forwards. And it seems to me, and this is not untypical in markets, that each successive bullish move, each successive ceasefire or each successive break of the ceasefire has less impact on the markets. I mean, if you look at the oil price, for example, it's now moved up again. The oil stocks have moved up. But I mean, when the ceasefire was broken and the bombing started again this last time, oil and the oil stocks did not move anywhere near as much as they did back in the last weekend of February or the first week of March. And similarly, the last ceasefire saw oil and oil stocks come back less than they did on the first ceasefire. So I think, these things have less and less impact until it's quite clear, and that'll continue until it's clear which direction this is actually going.
So it's an interesting sort of thing because I think you've mentioned recently that with all of this speculating that the Fed might have switched to hawkish mode, that they might raise rates, that actually the risk is they have to go the other way and that they actually might surprise on the other side. How do you think that factors into, first of all, why gold won't sell off here, why the bonds seem to have stopped selling off against the backdrop of this, and why do you think the market has the Fed wrong here?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I'm obviously not the only person in the world that thinks that the expectations of interest rate hikes is misguided. But the plain fact is the Fed funds futures are still pointing in the direction of interest rate hikes this year and next year. Not quite so overwhelmingly lopsided as they were a month ago, but still they're pointing in the direction of higher rates. I think the market has it wrong, both because it's underestimating the underlying weakness in parts of the economy, and that leads to an underestimation of the actual restraints that the Fed has. So we know that a majority of the Fed, certainly half of the Fed, wants to hike rates, and a majority of the Fed is more focused on inflation than they are on unemployment numbers and the economy generally. We know that, and the dot plot tells us that. But there's a limit to what they can do, certainly compared with 1980, where the debt levels today are just so much more than they were back then. So raising rates today has, and I'm not taking away from Paul Volcker's achievement, sure, but I don't think you could repeat that today because the debt levels are just so much higher. And then we have various areas of fragility in the economy. One would be among the what we'll call the lower, is that right? The lower 50% of a population in terms of net worth and in terms of income, who are living paycheck to paycheck, and so high interest rates will have a devastating, not just a small effect or a marginal effect, but a devastating effect on that sector of a population, and then you've got things like private credit, which I don't think the stresses in that market have completely gone away. We had some blow-ups a year ago, last August, and then, there was a lot of chatter about the private credit markets and it was going to blow up and everything else. And then 3 months later, nothing had happened and everybody says, oh, we escaped that one. We forget that in the housing bubble, it was 2006 when, what was it called? Is it New Century? The mortgage
That's right,
company?
New Century Financial, if I remember correctly.
They blew up, and then it was a whole year before we had Bear Stearns, followed, of course, by Lehman and AIG and the whole the whole financial crisis. So, these things there can be long lags before so I think the fact that we've gone nearly a year without another major credit disaster does not by any means mean it's gone away. And as we know, private credit, I'm not talking about the public, for public REITs, for public business development companies, but the private ones which value their own loans, right? And their pay is dependent on performance, so the incentive is not to mark them down, and there really is an extend and hope. And they don't have to do anything until, the company they've lent money to just stops paying them. They don't have to mark it down when they see stresses and concern about whether they will be able to repay. It's only when they actually don't repay that they have to mark it down. And that's why in private credit, you can often see examples where a company will mark a loan at 100 cents on the dollar for months and months and months, and then it goes from 100 cents on the dollar to 0 on the dollar. Well, if you're actually watching your portfolio, that's probably unrealistic. And with the public BDCs, you don't see that, at least certainly not among the better ones, the business development companies that are, publicly traded private credit. You'll often see a loan go from, 100 cents on the dollar to 80 cents on the dollar to 70 cents on the dollar. As the company gets concerned, they'll mark it down. You don't see that so much in the private companies. That doesn't mean that everything's rosy by any means. And the mere fact that they're putting blocks on people redeeming tells you everything is not rosy.
There's certainly been quite a bit of selling in the space. I mean, if we look at the stocks of Apollo, if we look at the stocks of Blackstone, Carlyle, they've come down quite a bit. Carlyle probably most recent, but it hasn't really infected, to your point, the broader market. And so there seems to be a sort of sleeper concern out there kind of gathering in the backdrop. Of course, higher rates would only complicate that kind of a situation.
Exactly. And I love your thing, sleeper concern. That's good. But yeah, absolutely. You put it a little more succinctly than I did, but exactly.
I've been looking at it myself and just kind of waiting for the shoe to drop whenever that is. And obviously, so far, and this kind of takes us into what I think is the other kind of big elephant in this room recently, this AI story and some of the distribution we've started to see happen there. I mean, obviously, since the lows after the start of the war, we've had this very aggressive but very lopsided rally happen, where bonds were still trading the war, so was gold, so was the dollar, but stocks went off on their own thing. And it was powered really by semiconductors and chip makers and all of this. And now there seems to be some distribution occurring there. How much risk do you think there is that because these are such giant market cap names that are tied up into all of this, the hyperscalers themselves, then the chip makers that have had a huge run, that this becomes one of these correlation one type sell-offs where distinction between, well, I own gold stocks or I own silver miners stops mattering because everything just sells?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. First of all, I think there's an enormous risk in the hyperscalers and the AI. Some people will disagree with me, but I mean, I think I think it is a bubble. You look at the, you look at the cash flow projections, the valuations, and the plain fact is that a lot of these companies that are putting billions of dollars that's borrowed for the most part, gated from the rest of the business in many cases, but a lot of them don't even have business plans that show when they're going to start making sufficient money to pay back what they borrowed. They don't even there's not even a plan. But we can say, well, that's a little optimistic or that's a little pessimistic, but some of them don't even have that plan. To me, this is just a classic bubble, I have to say, whether it's like, 1929 US stocks or 1988 Nikkei stocks or the dot-com or whatever. And in all of these cases, and the other thing to look at, of course, is just the chart patterns. When you see these big exponential moves, they invariably come all the way back, invariably. Yeah, I've just given 3 examples, but there are more, of course. They come all the way back. Now, the problem, and at the moment you've got distribution in the US. People have made enormous amounts of money if they were in early. And as, these things feed on themselves as they start to come down, and you've got 50% of your portfolio. You're way overweight on what you wanted to be, but you're way overweight and you've made a lot of money. The natural thing to do as they come down is to say, well, I better protect what I've got. But you've also got foreign investors. Let's not forget that one of the main reasons that there was so much foreign money in the US market over the last 5 years, one of the main reasons was because of AI and hyperscalers. If you were a Swiss manager or a British manager or whatever, you had choices of either investing in China or investing in the US. Yes, there were a few. We can come up with this French company, this French AI company, and this South Korean company. But basically, if you wanted to be in the space, you had to invest in the US. And for different reasons, for various reasons, foreign money is now coming out of the US market, not in a flood, but it's definitely coming out. And so those 2 things together, I think, combine to say we've probably seen the top of this market. And to get to your point, the fact that there is so much margin in the US market at the moment, as you know, it's at record levels now. And it's not just a record high, in percentage terms I'm talking, it's not just a record high, but where we are today compared with where we were last year is significantly higher. I can't quote you the numbers right now, sorry. So I would hesitate to. But I remember looking at a graph of this, a table of this, and we're significantly higher than where we were a year ago. So given the fact that there's so much margin, suggests that there will just be forced liquidation in many sectors. And frequently, 2008, 1987, frequently when you get a sharp drop in the market, gold stocks will actually do worse than the rest of the market, partly because of their illiquidity. Now, the good news is that they will frequently be the first ones to turn around. And we only have to look at 2008 to see that. The XAU, we didn't have a GDX back then, the XAU had actually bottomed and had doubled. It had already doubled before the S&P had even bottomed. Mm-hmm. So you often see a sharper drop, but a shorter drop and a early recovery in the gold stocks. So yeah, I think there is we're looking at rotation, and in a rotation, people take money out of one thing and move it into something else. And so we've seen value stocks move up this year. I think the last numbers I looked at, the Vanguard Value Fund, US Value Fund, was up like this is from 2 weeks ago, Well, 14%, the growth fund was up 4%. We're seeing small caps, Russell 2000 outperformed the S&P this year by 50%. So we're also seeing foreign markets outperform marginally, but still outperform the US market. So what we're seeing at the moment, I think, is indeed classic rotation, where you sell one thing and put the money somewhere else. But so if that continues, there doesn't have to be a crash in the market. But as we know, these things can get out of control quite quickly when certain widely held stocks drop sharply, and then you get the margin calls, and then people just start dumping everything. So I'd say so far so good, but perhaps like private credit, there might be another shoe to drop.
That's an interesting sort of added spice to this environment because, of course, you're right, there's been a kind of sucking sound for capital in the U.S. basically coming out of COVID because it's just been such a faster recovery and such a more dynamic recovery than elsewhere. And, of course, AI doesn't hurt the cause in that sense and attracts all kinds of capital. As that starts to rotate the other way, do you think that is a risk that presents itself for the U.S. dollar? Because, of course, if you're going to sell out of U.S. markets, ostensibly you're coming out of the dollar as well. And is that a reason to consider that maybe gold is starting to find its footing here sometime soon?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, markets, as we know, are discounting mechanisms. They do look ahead, and they don't always look at the first order, but they look at the second order. And so I think the market will be correct in saying that the dollar on a 6-month, 1-year basis probably has significantly more downside. Certainly when the war ends, that safe haven consideration for the dollar will go away. And that's really what has moved the dollar this year. And we'll get a continuation of the trend that we were seeing last year, which was just a declining dollar, not necessarily dramatically so. Although we have to point out that, as is well known, the first half last year was the sharpest decline in the dollar, first half decline in the dollar since 1974.
Dramatic.
So
yes.
it was fairly dramatic. So, I mean, I think there's no reason to think that we won't see a continuation of the dollar decline once the war has ended and the safe haven consideration goes away. And the market is probably looking at that.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Adrian Day. Thank you very much for joining us. Let the good folks know where they can get more from you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the website is adrianday.com. And that's got information on their money management and newsletter. It also has a few other interviews, none as good as yours, of course. But, adrianday.com.
Thank you very much. Adrian Day, everybody. You're watching Trading Trends.